Apple didn't keep us in suspense that long, right? You've had this really nice rally over a couple of days, finally crossed and closed over $1 trillion. So that's great. Obviously, it reflects just how big the market is, right? It's a little more than 4% of the S&P 500. It's about the same percentage of the S&P as Microsoft was, 19 years ago. So it makes sense on that front, but also really does reflect how remarkably huge Apple is as an economic entity. $250 billion in sales, most profitable company in the world. Why wouldn't it be up here around $1 trillion?
Stephanie, to what extent do you think it's been pushed over the line because it was close to the line and that this can mark a sort of temporary top?
Yeah, I think there's no two ways about it. The quarter was great relative to some of the other FANGs, right? I mean, they beat in sales and EBITDA and earnings. Guidance was supposed to come down. It didn't, so okay, that's great. What I think is happening is that Apple actually underperformed from the March low till Monday, or right before they reported, by 27 percentage points relative to Facebook and Netflix and Alphabet, all of them, on average. So I think it just lagged. And I think everyone was so jazzed up about owning FANG. They were all worried about owning some of the more cyclical technology names and the China-exposed technology names. So they all poured into FANG. Some of the FANGs weren't that good, and Apple was great. So you can see this rotation. I don't know if it lasts or not, but the valuation is still pretty supportive. But I think that is actually what's happening in addition to the good fundamentals.
Well, Facebook did bounce again today, closed up a little less than 3%. Michael Yoshikami, I'll bring you back. Last time we talked, you weren't worried about Facebook privacy concerns. You weren't worried about having to spend a lot to deal with some of the scandals and the issues. Are you going to walk back your comments on Facebook? Or are you still a believer?
Well, I'm just going to say that I was wrong. How about that? I don't know if that's walking back, but
that's
obviously
sort of what
the privacy issue. The Facebook issue obviously was bigger than we expected. Still huge cash flow, but you are starting to see some lack of engagement in Facebook users, and of course the growth is going to slow. So I still think it's a reasonable name, but it is going to go through a rough patch as they really get their footing here around this privacy issue.
What about, Michael, your view on Apple? Do you think it's the one to pick of the AA FANG names at the moment?
Well, I like Google as well, but I will say Apple, I think, is a reasonable purchase. I mean, remember, Warren Buffett, the value king, right, bought Apple not too long ago, has done very well. I think Stephanie's absolutely right in her last comment that she made, that it's still a reasonably priced stock. I mean, you have all sorts of technology stocks out there with huge valuation numbers, huge PE ratios, and then you have Apple floating around with hundreds of billions of dollars of cash, huge growth rate, a services sector that's going through the roof right now. So I think it's a reasonable play. To me, it's a safer technology investment than some of the flyer names out there.
Mike, before we move on to Tesla, is Apple a consumer company? When we discuss that point, should it
does seem to function more that way right now. We're not necessarily talking about, constant sort of software-driven innovation necessarily. Even though that's going on, that's not really where the financials come from. So I do think it's interesting because Apple's fundamentals don't change all that rapidly. The perception around the stock and the positioning around the stock change radically. So it goes on these streaks. A day like today, it seems, why wouldn't you buy it? Buffett owns 5%. He's not selling it. The company's buying stock every day. It's perfect. It can't go down. So you're going to get these swings like this. And then at some point, people are going to be worried about what the supply chain says. And is iPhone in structural decline?